Selamat pagi, ini video 501. Ada beberapa berita terakhir. Yang pertama adalah hasil kunjungan Jokowi ke Kertanegara. Pada pertemuan Jokowi dengan Prabowo, diusulkan mengenai periode kedua Prabowo-Gibran. Oleh Prabowo biasa, dia nggak jawab iya atau enggak, cuman dia ngomong bahwa Prabowo belum mikir untuk 2029 mau maju atau enggak. Kenapa Prabowo menolak halus usulan dari Jokowi? Karena perkembangan terakhir di Cina, 2 minggu lagi Xi Jinping akan mengundurkan diri. Jabatan Xi Jinping itu ada 4 ya, di antaranya adalah sebagai presiden, sebagai ketua komite Partai Komunis Cina, dan sebagai kepala tentara pembebasan rakyat Cina. Oleh karena itu, jabatan mana yang dia akan mundur pada Kongres Partai Komunis Cina tanggal 20 Oktober akan ditentukan. Ini menjadi pertimbangan berat bagi Prabowo karena apa? Karena Prabowo juga ditekan oleh Amerika untuk meninggalkan utang gelap Cina. Kalau seandainya Prabowo tidak meninggalkan Gibran, maka Prabowo selamanya akan menanggung utang gelap Cina dan BUMN akan segera ditagih atau diambil oper oleh Cina untuk membayar utang tersebut.
Well, after 1 year's delay, Beijing has finally announced its long-anticipated fourth plenum. It will be held in Beijing from October 20th to 23rd. Less than 3 weeks from now. The question on everyone's mind, does this mean Xi Jinping is just weeks away from stepping down? So people generally come up with 4 possible scenarios. The first, Xi Jinping neither gives up power nor position. But that looks unlikely because he has already stepped back in practice. So the second scenario is Xi Jinping gives up both power and position. That's the opposite of the first scenario, meaning that he will step down entirely in 3 weeks. That also seems improbable. The anti-Xi camp hasn't decisively crushed him. So that leaves 2 middle paths, both moving him to the second line. The first one is called relinquish power, but not position. And the other scenario is relinquish position, but not power. That would mean giving up 1 or 2 titles while still pulling the strings from behind the curtain. Now, of these, I think the most likely scenario is a hybrid. That is, he relinquishes power and most of his jobs or titles, but keeps 1 position for face saving. The likeliest outcome is that he gives up the general secretary position and the chairmanship of the CMC, stepping back from real power, but holds on to the presidency as a ceremonial role until either the 2 sessions in 2026 or the 21st Party Congress in 2027. In other words, the fourth plenum will start transition Xi's power to the next team, and Beijing is already signaling a power shift and hinting at who the next leader will be. That brings us to Li Qiang's recent trip to New York. The Wall Street Journal reported that while attending the UN Assembly, the premier held closed-door meetings with American business leaders and scholars, such as people from the U.S.-China Business Council, the National Committee on U.S.-China Relations, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, the Council on Foreign Relations, and many top executives. And in his talk, Li compared U.S.-China relations to a marriage, saying couples may quarrel, even fight, but still maintain a close bond because they need each other. The journal interpreted this as a signal of Beijing's desire for stability at a time when Trump and Xi had just spoken by phone. That's the standard read. Most people read it like that. But they missed something huge, a political signal hiding in plain sight. I don't know if the reporters or the editors working at the journal didn't see it or if they simply chose not to tell us, but it's very obvious. So to understand that, you need 2 pieces of background. Okay, first, Li Qiang is China's number 2 guy, the head of government, second only to Xi, who leads the party. This was his first trip to the US as premier. And in nearly a decade, he's the first Chinese premier to visit. So for him to speak so directly to American business and policy elites, even in a closed-door setting, means he was not freelancing or improvising. He was voicing an official high-level position. Second, the US-China marriage metaphor was not Li Qiang's invention. It was this guy's, Wang Yang. There's a whole story behind this expression. Back in July 2013, during the fifth Sino-US Strategic and Economic Dialogue in Washington, Wang Yang, then vice premier in charge of US-China relations, used it. Xi Jinping had just taken power, and Wang was making his debut in that role as vice premier in charge of US-China relations. His counterpart was Treasury Secretary at the time, Jacob Lew, who was also new to his post. So Wang Yang joked that since they were both newcomers, they were like newlyweds. You know, the Chinese expression newcomers, 新人, also could mean newlyweds. So that's where the joke or the metaphor came from. And Wang Yang even poked fun at Rupert Murdoch's messy divorce from Wendy Deng, saying that the US-China couldn't afford a divorce like that. So it was completely off the cuff, but it landed well. The American delegation laughed. Major outlets like the Wall Street Journal and Reuters described it as colorful and vivid. Even Chinese state media joined it at first. People's Daily's English edition said Wang's metaphor reflected the two countries' inseparable economic partnership, praising his wit and humor. But the praise didn't last long. Soon after he returned to China, Wang was heavily criticized inside the party. Hardliners said the couple metaphor demeaned China, made it sound like a housewife dependent on the US, and undermined national dignity. And online, Chinese nationalists accused Wang of groveling, right? So America is the husband and we're the wife. So under pressure, Wang dropped the metaphor entirely. He never mentioned it again. So from then on, it became his personal scarlet letter, a sensitive tag no one else dared to touch, especially after Xi Jinping launched wolf warrior diplomacy and pushed the slogan of East rising, West declining. Fast forward to now, to 2025, Li Qiang suddenly resurrected that phrase. That's extraordinary. There's no way he did it on his own. But do you think Xi Jinping authorized him to do that? Never. Not only because it's Wang Yang's line, but because Wang is considered one of Xi Jinping's biggest political rivals. So why would Xi Jinping put his rival's label on his own forehead? That's impossible. So that leaves one explanation. The signal didn't come from Xi. It came from those outside him or above him, most likely from the decision-making and coordination body. Remember, there was an announcement coming out a few months ago announcing this decision-making body made up of party elders. So multiple leaks suggest Wen Jiabao is the group's head and Wang Yang serving as the executive deputy. So what Li Qiang did in New York was essentially deliver Wang Yang's message. By reviving Wang's US-China marriage or couple metaphor before America's top elites, he was telling Washington, Wang Yang is back. He is the one shaping US-China relations now or maybe going forward, and not Xi Jinping. And the fact that Li Qiang, the sitting premier, followed this instruction shows just how much sway the party elders camp currently has over the political landscape. Put simply, the premier's remark confirms many leaks and whispers that Wang Yang is poised to replace Xi Jinping as interim party leader until the 21st Congress. Okay, not as the permanent one, but the interim party leader until 2027, October 2027. And another commentator also claimed that Xi Jinping's downfall at the fourth plenum has already been verbally notified to the hundreds of Central Committee members who are the highest ranking CCP officials. And reportedly, Hu Jintao suggested that the reshuffle was unavoidable, but all positions would only be interim until the 21st Party Congress. All four major factions apparently agreed that Wang Yang is the safest interim candidate. Nobody sees him as a threat. The four factions are the Xi Jinping faction, the Hu Jintao faction, the Prince Lin faction, and then possibly the Jiang Zemin faction. So he's most likely the next party leader, while Hu Chunhua is most likely to take Li Qiang's place as the next premier, also as interim. And this confirms our previous predictions. I've said this many times, that Wang Yang and Hu Chunhua will be the next leadership duo. So 3 weeks, that's all that separates us from knowing CCP's next step, from knowing Xi Jinping's future and possibly the end of his rule. The clock is ticking, and once October begins, every day could bring a new twist.